Getting the job done right is the goal of every home builder and homeowner. As a member of our building community, All Access will become a trusted resource for every stage of your building and renovation projects. Plus, we're constantly adding new project guides, videos, articles, expert tips, and more for members only, because there's always more work to be done. Sign up now or give a gift to another builder at finehomebuilding.com/allaccess.
Flue sizes, and they're actually made out of sheep wool felt, which is kind of strange, but I would recommend.
Does it make sense to put a flammable material? I mean, I guess the plastic.
No, wool is actually flame resistant, which is why, like,
you never see sheep on fire. Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Podcast, a weekly discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. This is Senior Editor Patrick McComb. Today I'm joined by producer Jeff Rose.
Hello.
And GBA Editor Kylie Jacques.
Hello.
FineHomebuilding.com Editor Rob Watzak.
Hey there.
I feel like we should come up with someone else just to keep the ball rolling. Where are we? You can find previous podcasts and check out the show notes at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. Please email your questions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com.
I felt like we should be running like out of the locker room through a big banner there for a second.
I know. I feel pretty energized myself. Good job, Patrick.
Oh, that was kind of fun.
Team spirit all the way.
Rob, I've been watching you rebuild your punky porch. What the heck inspired that?
Well, I haven't gotten to the rebuilding part yet.
Well, just say you're tearing apart your punky porch.
So,
Punky porch.
my house is like 150 years old, right? And I'm constantly chipping away at the things that are most noticeable. And I rarely go to my front yard because that's just where we get the mail and take out the trash. And so my front porch has a flat roof on it that I'm guessing the previous homeowners built maybe 50 years ago. And the roll roofing that was on it when I moved into the house, which was punky at best when I moved in 20 years ago, is pretty much non-existent now. So it's sort of like patches of tar on old plywood. And I knew I was going to have to get around to it. But what really pushed me over the edge was that the floorboards, which were a combination of like tongue and groove fir and pressure treated 2x6s, were getting really dangerous for the mailman. So I was like, I got to deal with this porch. So I tore it all apart, and I'm pleasantly surprised so many times with this house that when you build stuff with old solid wood, they could be soaking wet and still be in good shape. If there was OSB or any sort of new crappy wood in that porch, it would have been gone by now.
That makes you kind of wonder about houses that are being built today.
Well, it just means that you have to pay more attention to those water management details.
Yeah, there is no forgiveness.
You're
they
right.
just rot immediately.
Yeah. So right now my porch, I was going to just do, as with most projects, it's like, oh, maybe I'll just replace the roof. And the decking. Well, the roof posts are resting on the decking. So I put in some temporary posts onto the ground and then tore out the decking. And so the roof and posts are sort of dangling in the air right now.
I'm really glad you did this just in time for trick-or-treating. That seemed like perfect timing.
I know. I got to hustle to get it done.
You have lots.
Because Halloween's like our favorite holiday, too. My daughter's like, can we decorate the front porch? What front porch?
Well, it does look a little ominous in its present state. Maybe you could use that to highlight the theme.
Theatrical scene.
Levitating porch.
Jeff, you must be nearly done with your deck by now. Is that true?
It is. Yeah, I've got the last couple of rows of decking to put down. I paused because it was like the convenient place to put in the tension ties for the outside rim joist. And
sure. But then you have at least an equal project putting up the railing. Am I right about that?
Yeah, which I'm really kind of digging not having the railing right now. But
I don't have a railing, and I dig it too. How far off the ground are you? Yeah.
12 feet.
Oh, well, that's different.
Jeff's deck is definitely a trip to the ER.
Yeah, right.
You just need to put in one of those little safety nets outside of the deck, like we have it, like a circus.
Actually, I have a climbing net I could put up. It's
Or a big sand pit.
It is a really cool feeling to be up that
It is.
high and have an unobstructed view off. I think
Yeah.
it's kind of cool to be in the trees, right?
Depends on how bad a fear of heights you have.
Right.
So the house I grew up in, we had a deck that was even higher, and it was on a steep slope, and it had no railing.
Wow.
No railing, just because your parents were just seeing if Darwin was going to, strike the family.
I mean, 6 kids is like you lose one. What the heck?
You know what, though?
Jeff.
The rest of the world, most places don't really care about this kind of stuff. Like, I remember who was
Doesn't mean we shouldn't.
was talking about some crazy staircase in that podcast he did. I mean, that webinar he did for us. And he's like, they went down to this place in Mexico to build this stair. And they're like, we were so thrilled because we couldn't build that in the United States.
Yeah, falling off of decks and breaking your neck is kind of a bad thing. I think you all would agree.
Yeah, ruins your
I
whole
feel like
day.
if you have a deck like mine, which is about, I'd say maybe 2.5 feet, maybe 3 feet off the ground, off the grade, it makes it very convenient to hop up and hop down.
Yeah,
Now,
so I think the code allows it
however-
to be up to 30 inches off above grade without
But
a rail.
if you did take a wrong step, you could break an ankle very easily. So something to be said for obstructions.
So what have you been doing on your place, Kylie?
I've been trying to do a little air sealing in my basement, getting nervous about, I don't know how comfortable I am. It's not for temperature control so much as it is for humidity control. So
You need to stop air movement so you can actually lower the indoor humidity,
exactly,
right?
because as you know, I bought a very good quality dehumidifier, and I want it to work well. So I did put some polyurethane over the framing, the exterior framing of the cellar door. And I fixed the door so that it shuts properly. And my next step, and I bought some canned spray foam, but as I got really thinking about it and talking to Brian, the best thing to do is something that I don't think I have the skills to do, which is to cut and cobble some rigid foam and seal the rim
Have
joists.
you made like paper things in art class?
Well, here's the thing, Patrick, though. It's not easy access. It's like, and my measurement skills are pretty pitiful. I will admit that straight up. So to do what needs to be done, because I did clean it all. I got in there. I looked at everything. I know exactly where the insulation, in whatever form it takes, needs to go. But it's not easy. I mean, when I keep thinking, we've talked about cut and cobbling left and right on this show, and when you start to really think about doing it, I was pretty intimidated, quite frankly. It's not.
Oh my goodness! So here's
Takes a
a
lot of
solution
time.
for you.
two-part spray foam, right? That's what Brian suggested.
Yeah.
That's what I'm-
No. I have a totally different solution.
Okay, what?
It's a happy hour at your place with a couple colleagues,
Yeah, because you
and
guys
everyone
are
takes.
always en route over here to help me out.
Well, if there was drinking involved, I think you'd have a better turnout.
The access is really weird, and it's interesting. I've been thinking a lot about rim joists and how to seal your basement, and now that I've got one to look at and consider, it's not that straightforward. So I did start to price those 2-part kits. Holy Moses, they're expensive.
What's hundreds, right?
Like 600s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
600.
Well, there's 2 different sizes usually. I feel like there's a smaller one, but I don't know how many square feet you
Yeah,
got to
I haven't finished my research. But then you get into you need a respirator, you need your Tyvek suit, which I was surprised to find they're pretty cheap.
Oh yeah, they're like throwaway things.
I didn't
That's
know
not
that.
a big deal.
Yeah. So I don't get intimidated by it. I don't. You know me, I'm pretty crunchy. The idea of spraying foam does not appeal to me. But I do want a healthier environment in my. The whole impetus for doing this is because indoor air quality is very much on my mind, and I have a lot of mold growth. And sealing up my basement, dehumidifying my basement is a very good place to start improving those conditions.
I'm thinking we need like a little how-to video on cutting and cobbling for
I think
folks
it's a
like
great idea.
I'm
yourself.
surprised that doesn't exist. I haven't seen anybody do that on either
It's
of our
pretty
sites.
intimidating. So I think if you did have something like that, it would help people.
Especially since the ideas behind it have kind of changed over the years, where people are moving more towards tapes and caulks than just straight up foaming them.
Boy, if
And
only
to
we
be
had a
honest-
set with which to record a video.
I wonder where you might find that in Southbury.
Jeez. No. We'll have to put the word out.
And also, if you go that route, I can buy some recycled foam on Craigslist, I guess is a great source.
You do
for
not
that.
need that much foam. Those dealers sell it by truckload quantity.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. I think mine was 3 8-foot tall pallets of 4x8 sheets. Is
For
what
your
ours-
whole barn, that is.
Yeah.
For your whole barn,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, I don't need that much. I think the square footage is it's about 800 square feet. And we're just talking about the rim joist. So
Oh, yeah, right. I thought you were saying you needed 800 square feet for the
no,
rim
no,
joist.
the
I was
size
like,
of the-
dude, no
No,
way.
the size of the basement. That's the square footage of the basement.
Yeah. So you only need 100 square feet, maybe, or
Yeah,
something like that.
exactly.
That's some pretty math
That's
skills,
a
Rob.
few sheets. Yeah.
Right.
Oh my goodness. So this comes from Larry. Hey, podcast gurus, guess what showed up in my TikTok FYP page? Rob, what's an FYP page for those of us who are...
I think we're all too old to understand.
Right. That's where Jess comes in.
Yeah, we need Jess on the podcast.
Do you know what
Jess,
that is? I don't know what that is.
I don't know what that part of it is. Of course, we know TikTok is.
I
What
imagine
is
it's
it?
like their feed, the
Okay.
feed, whatever.
He says, I'm surprised it hasn't been mentioned on the podcast. There's not a lot of content yet, but I've enjoyed what's there, especially Patrick's demo of his top-rated sawhorse. One minor nit to pick, though, search results on the website no longer indicate the date of the article. When searching for a tool review, for example, it would be helpful to know if the review is within the last couple of years or 10 plus years old. In the latter case, the tool might not even be available anymore, and there might be a newer or better model. So why waste time reading the review? Even the articles themselves no longer indicate the date they were published, only sometimes the issue number. Obviously, this was a deliberate choice, but I'd be interested in the rationale. Well, if you're looking for rationale here, Larry, I don't know what to tell you.
I'll give you one hint. If it's not, if it's on a regular article page on the website, the published date is usually in the URL of the article itself. So that's one place to look. But it is a deliberate choice, and it's not a choice made by editors. I mean, we're not the ones who actually make the website. We just make the content on the website. But over the years, as rationale has changed based on people's
Search
impression
habits.
of the value of content based on age. I mean, the thing about our website is that a good percentage of the stuff on our website is evergreen, meaning the way you trim a window out in 1999 is pretty much the same way that you do it nowadays. You might just have some different tools. So, but it's not, again, not our choice. It's probably like a web developer or a marketing choice. And it's unfortunate for some people's reasoning, but
So, Larry, we'll get you the marketing email and you can send a letter to them. No, it's a good question, and it drives me bananas too sometimes too, especially as he suggests with the tool reviews, which if the thing is more than 2 years old, it's of a lot less utility. Totally true. We got a fun ad from Adam. Hi, FHB team. I thought you might get a lively discussion about this whole house fan ad. So who wants to try and describe this?
well, it's got an illustration that looks like something you might see on Green Building Advisor with
Or
little
Fine
arrows
Homebuilding, right?
showing air movement. But you got to admit, it's like if you don't know anything about how houses are built or building science, it makes sense. You see a picture of a house, it's hot inside. You got a big fan in your dusty, dirty attic, sucking all the air into your house, supposedly through all in this
And
picture.
it's bringing in the blue air, which is much cooler than the red air that's being exhausted.
Yeah, of course. But you notice that every single window and door has to be wide open in order for that to work. But
it doesn't show that it's backdrafting your furnace and sucking carbon monoxide into your house, right?
or pulling all the mouse poop through your insulation.
And radon. Yeah, there's nothing in this country that we can't sell. That's what I love about
I wasn't able to get on the server and see the ad. How old is it?
Oh, it looked like it came in a Sunday circular from
probably
last
recent.
week.
Yeah. No,
okay.
this isn't one of those vintage ads. This is something
Gotcha.
that lots of people, and it's like a whole house fan. If your house is well air sealed and you open your windows and doors and you use it only when the outside air is cool in the shoulder months and it's hot in the house and
and what's the part you're missing? What's the part you're missing?
What am I missing?
It has to have low humidity, right? Otherwise,
Dry.
you're taking cool, wet outdoor air at nighttime and bringing it into your house, right?
Yeah, I mean that's what it comes down to, is that like the conditions have to be perfect indoors and outdoors for something like this to work.
And this works in some places like Colorado, where it's very cool and dry at night, and it's hot in the day.
Yeah.
I think it works in Colorado. My, knowledge of geography and weather conditions has been called into question lately. I'll get more to that lately in a little bit here. This comes from Suzanne in Chattanooga. Oh my God, listening to your podcast 396 prompted me to put down my knitting and email you all. The question Brian posted about can lights led to such a broad discussion about lighting choices and preferences. The market surrounding LED lighting has and is changing so rapidly. There are way too many choices to navigate, especially if you're a person of taste and highly influenced by the poor choices of others. One advantage of LEDs is their longevity. I would submit that this is also a disadvantage because your neighbors that have white LEDs on their porch fixture and corner lights will never change them, thus eliminating the possibility they could dumbly choose attractive lower lumen soft white bulbs. I recently had my kitchen can lights replaced with LEDs, soft white, low-profile fixtures. At the same time, I had the electrician install a dimmer. I can adjust the lighting to an acceptable level, and I like them well enough. The main reason I did this was because the trim rings on my can fixtures would not snug up to the ceiling anymore. Long story short, my husband likes the new lights and increases the dimming level to maximum, which I hate. We battle with it. However, after doing various Google searches, I found a device that I believe will allow me to limit the brightness of the dimmer via an app and Bluetooth capability. I'm sure there are more sophisticated ways to do this, but ours is not a smart home. So I just wanted to give this one situation a try. The switch I got is a Leviton dimmer/timer with Bluetooth. Also, just for the record, I agree with Kylie about overhead lighting, except in the kitchen. And don't get me started on the awful new LED streetlights that are replacing the nice orange sodium streetlights in our lovely neighborhood. It looks like a used car lot at night. I have read that they can be dimmed, but I can't figure out how to get up there. Thanks, and keep up the good work, Suzanne.
I love it. I love the idea of her.
I like
Packing
how she's trying to take things into her own hands.
Yeah.
covertly.
Suzanne,
Exactly.
I'm fully convinced. If
She's
you
like
set
an
up
LED
an orange
ninja.
extension ladder and put out some traffic cones and put on a hard hat and an orange vest,
Right.
no one would give you a second thought to you going up there and tinkering
Be
with
sure
the
to have a
lights.
clipboard.
I tell you, I got the same problem in my neighborhood. It's like they put these super bright
Yeah.
streetlights in, and they shine on our bedroom window. It's like
Ugh, it's
I don't
terrible.
even care how bright they are. I just wish they would put like narrower shades on the lamps, so they just
Yeah.
shine on the street where it matters.
Right.
Isn't that one of the principles of dark sky initiatives? Is that you're not
Yes.
supposed to have lights that shoot up at all, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I just put in some landscape lighting in my yard because in the winter I can't stand like tripping around in the dark. But I got the lowest lumen like little deck lights I could, and I just
Nice.
drilled them into some of the posts around my yard and put a transformer, and it's like just enough light for me to not break my ankle when I'm walking down the steps. That's all I need. And it's not,
So interesting what people get used to, because when I first moved here from New Hampshire, where the sky is black and just full of stars and very enjoyable, to Southbury, Connecticut, where everything, despite the fact that this community shuts down at 7:00, but the lights stay on all night long, all night, because I get up very early, so I know the town is lit. And it's just, when I first moved here, I was just so hyper aware of it. I just thought it was incredibly obnoxious and unnecessary. But now I don't even notice it. People get used to things and then they don't question them. And I think that's part of the problem,
yeah.
Like she's saying, her neighbor that, has these obnoxious lights could probably do better at this point because there are more options, but probably won't because they're so long lasting, which is a good thing. But, you just get used to stuff.
When I was researching like the same topic you're talking about there, Kylie, because I was like, I want like nice cozy lighting in the yard. I found some article about, I guess there was a blackout. I don't know if it was in the 90s or whenever it was in LA, and they were getting all these 911 calls because people were seeing these like this gaseous cloud in the sky, and it was the Milky Way. They'd never seen it before.
That's terrible.
Boy,
that is
terrible.
terrible.
LED
Okay,
lights.
so getting back to my knowledge of geography, this comes from Adam, who's formerly from Houston, currently from, I'm going to try it the right way, Jeff, Chittenango?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. Hello, FHB podcast crew. Listening to episode 394, where you talked about B's new home build in Houston, as well as John's question about hurricane country in Florida, emphasize again just how northern-focused the podcast panel is. To start with, Houston is Gulf Coast hurricane country, the same as Mississippi and Louisiana. They have similar wind speed requirements when building. To make it worse, Houston is also flatter than a pancake. So when building in Houston or the surrounding area, you need to assume your house will flood unless you elevate it. 15 years ago, some areas of Houston were considered more desirable than others because they didn't flood. The Memorial Day storm of 2015 and others put an end to that. In a 9-hour period, a single storm dropped 162 billion gallons of water on Houston. That is a foot of water in some areas. When that much water drops on a flat place, it floods everything as there is nowhere for the water to go. During these types of storms, it is unfortunately common for a house that is never flooded to end up with waist-deep water inside if it is on a slab foundation. So any building on a slab in Houston should be designed not just to withstand the extreme humidity, but also either be elevated above ground or designed to survive soaking and drying. This is one reason that ground floors in the Houston area are frequently wall-to-wall tile. Since B's house is brick, we know that it is probably a slab on grade with a brick ledge. So if you have a watertight layer protecting the inside of the house, you have to ensure that the flood waters won't cause the walls to cave in due to the pressure, or that the water can rush in some other way fast enough to equalize the pressure before the walls collapse. Additionally, Houston is on expansive clay soil, so any foundation at all should have bell-bottom piers 12 to 15 feet deep to prevent the foundation from breaking over time. The clay soil moves so much that during droughts, the soil shrinking breaks public water mains. Wow. Okay, there you go.
So now, my sister-in-law lives in Michigan in an area that I think was all swamp.
Okay, I'm going to wait to see how this relates. All right.
No, it was like a huge agricultural county that's all swamp. And when they build houses there, they basically build them up on elevated berms or platforms that they build. Like they excavate, they scrape the soil up. And I wonder if that's like a common thing down there. I mean, I haven't really spent a whole lot of time in the Houston area, but it's like, it seems like if you're not going to build on piers and you're going to build a big house, that somehow you got to get it up off the ground. No?
The other day I said to Brian, I keep coming across these questions on GBA about, how to build in a flood zone, what to do with your basement, how to detail your basement, what's the best approach. And his response was, why would you build in a flood zone? And I thought, well, there's more areas are flood zones now. So, our choices are limited in terms of where to build.
Oh, well, I would also point out, too, that the flat ground is also the flood zone, right?
Exactly.
The easiest places to build and the places where agriculture is traditionally done well, right? Are floodplains.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, Adam, you like the other folks who know more about stuff than we do. I love hearing from you. Thank you. Oh, boy. So our first question comes from Owen. Hi, guys. Really enjoyed the show. Sometimes the headline for the show has a topic that is interesting to me, but I don't have time to listen to all of it in one sitting. Would it be possible to add chapters to the video with each chapter title referencing the question or timestamps in the notes? This would really help people who are stumbling upon an archived episode as well as jump to the topic of interest to them. So, and other folks have suggested that it is a manpower, woman power issue. We just don't have time to go through and do that, and there's no one who's getting paid to do that. So if you're volunteering, we'll totally let you do that. It is a great idea, and I honestly think YouTube dings us because we don't do that. But
yeah.
Well, and that being said, we have a new social media editor now who is going to make YouTube a priority. And so that might be one step that she has time to work on. So
it is a good idea. And I like that, too, with the YouTube videos I watch. So Owen has a question, too. I also have a question. I have a natural gas fireplace insert installed in a former wood-burning chimney. The house was built in 1968 in Ottawa, Canada. This fireplace was one of the main sources of air infiltration during a recent blower door test. We have the gas turned off since we bought the house and don't plan on using the insert except in some kind of electrical grid down situation midwinter. Is there a way to install a removable air seal or plug in the aluminum chimney insert, either accessible from the gas fireplace or worse, the chimney above? I realize this comes with the risk of accidental CO poisoning should someone turn it on, so we'd install a lockout on the gas valve. My guess is there's also a big unsealed gap between the original chimney and the insert liner as well. Are there some high temperature sealants that can be used here? Thank you, Owen. Yeah, Owen, there's an easy solution for this. Anyone ever heard of a chimney balloon? Have you guys ever heard of this?
I haven't.
Yeah,
No.
Justin actually featured him a bunch of years ago on the website, and I actually went to the website. It's just chimneyballoon.us was one of the companies.
Do you want to describe it, Rob, please?
So it basically looks like, you know, the bag that's inside of one of those boxes of wine. It's like
Yeah.
one of those.
That's a good description. Yeah.
I usually stop when the box is
Picture
empty,
that.
Rob. I don't know.
Yeah, you can make your own chimney balloon at home. But that's not the only kind of product. I looked at this company's. I don't know who makes it, but the website is just called Cleverly Solved. Maybe that's the actual company. But anyway, they make the chimney balloons, but then they also have these felt plugs with handles on them too that are all different shapes, so they fit specific flue sizes, and they're actually made out of sheep wool felt, which is kind of strange. But I would recommend.
Does
that
it make sense to put a flammable material? I mean, I guess the plastic
No,
balloon
wool is actually flame resistant, which is why
you never see sheep on fire.
yeah, it's why you hear, if you go over one of those historic tours where they have the open hearths and the old antique homes, they're like and the cook would always wear a wool apron because linen would catch on fire. But
I guess I need to go to more history museums. I had never heard that.
But the lockout thing is also really smart. And in fact, what I might even consider doing is if you've got a cable or whatever it is that's attached to this plug that you pull it out with, I would seriously put a lock on your gas and then put the key on the end of the balloon so that you can't actually go and open the gas lock out without removing the plug.
Do you have any sense of how those are installed, Rob? I can't quite picture that.
The chimney balloon?
Yeah.
You put it up there and blow into the tube, and it inflates to match the size of the flue.
It goes in from above. It goes in
down.
down.
It goes from the bottom, and then this little kind of red cord with a big caution note is on the bottom. So theoretically, if you go to start a fire or light the gas fireplace, you're going to see this thing and be like, oh, I forgot to take out the chimney balloon, and it's not going to vent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's actually, I didn't look at them, but there's some videos on their website showing how to install them. So
cool. That seems like a
those
great
life vests they demonstrate on the airplane before you take off? It looks a lot like that, except it doesn't have a beacon, although maybe it should.
So just as a tag-along question here, he was interested in high temperatures or sealants that can withstand high temperatures, and I came across a product that I just was curious if you guys were familiar with. Rutland Black Furnace Cement. It says it's good up to 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah, that's the sort of thing that you would use around like a chimney pipe where it goes into a brick wall. And a lot of those chimney liners, they also dump these beads of perlite or something like that as insulation around them in the chimney cavity around the liners, and then I imagine you would seal that with some sort of chimney cement or high temperature sealant at the top.
I think it's customary, and you never know how people do things, if they do it the right way or not, but when you put one of those liners in, you're supposed to seal it to the masonry at the top, which would create what amounts to an air seal, right? Because then you don't have this stack effect. It's allowing the air from inside to go up around the flue liner and then exit the top of the chimney. So I think if this was done correctly, that is largely solved to begin with. But
yeah, one note too about if there's insulation in the cavity, a lot of the flue liner manufacturers recommend the insulation because what that does is it helps the flue maintain a high enough temperature to actually have a stack effect, which causes the draft.
It improves draft, right? Because you don't it's not cooling off. You have and what do you put? Vermiculite in there, as I recall, right, Rob?
Yes. That's right. Yeah.
That's fascinating.
You need to get out more, Kylie.
I just chimney inserts and just dealing with chimneys and trying to they're a challenge.
I mean,
There's lots of solutions and
every one of these little
related.
things we talk about has some weird little scientific fact that you kind of
Exactly.
need to know for it to work properly, right?
Right. That's true.
And I would also say that Owen has pointed out a huge building science failure in many homes, and that's
Yep.
the freaking huge
freaking
chimney in
chimney,
the
yep.
envelope, right?
Yep. How did Matt fix his? I think he just put rigid foam at the bottom and rigid foam at the top. And that was that.
Yep. And that's also a good way to go, but
He wasn't
you
using
can't
an
use the
insert. Yeah,
gas
you can't use
insert
it.
if you do
Exactly.
that.
Exactly.
I think I just stuck like an empty, like 1 gallon pail in the opening of mine when I took out my boiler.
That sounds like what I would do.
I think the other thing you can do too, and Carol actually did it in our basement in a pretty sizable hole, was to take a trash bag and fill it with fiberglass insulation, and then you can stuff it. But the trash bag is the air seal, right, that is not present with just a bat of fiberglass insulation. So I thought that was pretty clever.
That is clever.
Makes sense.
Good on you, Carol.
She's pretty smart.
Yep.
So this comes from John. Good day, FHB podcast crew. Firstly, I enjoy listening to your podcast and listen to it pretty well every day. I'm also an FHB subscriber and love the content. I've only been a subscriber for a short time, but I've already learned so much as a young builder, so thank you for the work you guys and gals do. I have an ice damming problem in a client's addition that was added to the house around 15 years ago. They just got the addition re-roofed with shingles 2 years ago, and the ice damming problem started the winter after. They never had issues before. I suggested roof vents, but she didn't want that. She wants to use a de-icing cable run along the eave and through the eave trough and down the gutter. I also suggested cutting a couple holes in the attic space from the main house to the attic space in the addition, so at least it could vent out through those holes and up through the vents in the main roof. By doing this, I could also see if there's enough insulation in the addition as well. Unfortunately, it's a vaulted ceiling, so even if it wasn't insulated enough, I'm not sure I could fit in there to insulate the additional ceiling to the proper R value. The addition ceiling to the proper R value. Also, you'd have to would you have any standout brands of de-icing cable out there, or are they all similar? If you have a better solution to this problem, that would be just fantastic. Thanks for the work you do, John. All right, so let's have a brief chat about gutter de-icing cables. We've seen this, right?
Yeah. You're not a fan, right? As I recall.
That's an understatement, Kylie. It's a huge energy suck, right? It's like that. It solves a problem, sure, but oh my gosh, that's a rough way to go.
It seems temporary.
Yeah,
Are those prone to failure too? I don't really trust them. Seems like things could go wrong.
It was I saw it in a lot of houses in Stowe, Vermont, because Stowe is a very snowy place, 200-300 inches of snow possibly a year, and solves the problem. But geez, air sealing is a way better way to prevent this ice damming.
Right.
Well, there are two things that usually cause ice damming in a house. It's either air leakage or just heat radiating through to that surface of the roof, where there's an overhang, so that you've got warm air or warm or heat just getting into a portion of the roof above the edge of the wall, and then melting this snow, and then the cool portion of the roof is cool enough that then it refreezes and causes the dam. So the problem is always that when you do the cables, you're treating a symptom, not the problem. And so you need to find out where that heat is escaping. And if you got cathedral ceilings, that makes it obviously a lot more challenging to deal with. But if you had an open attic to get into those eaves, sometimes you just have to open things up. But basically, you have to try to identify where the air is leaking from that corner, where the ceiling meets the wall is typically where you've got some sort of air leak at your top wall plate, or maybe it's in your attic into the open soffits in your eaves.
Or it could be can lights in your vaulted ceiling.
Sometimes
right?
in the winter, you can look at the patterning on the roof from the exterior to see where those leaks might be.
Absolutely.
And even if
a better way or a more reliable way for all conditions is to get an IR camera. If you got a pretty good temperature differential and you look at the house from the outside, you can often see where the holes are through the camera's viewfinder.
Yeah. But trying
we need to have one of those.
We do.
You need to have one?
No, we all need to have one on staff, because I wanted to use one this weekend, and turns out Matt's the only one that has one. We need one on staff. That's an aside.
Well, I'm game. I'll put that on my expense
put
account.
that on your
I don't
list.
care. Do you have one of these, Rob? You're a gadgety guy.
No,
I
I've
asked
borrowed
him.
them from people before, but I've never actually owned one myself. But I've
It's like
always
what,
been wanted to-
$200 now for entry level?
Yeah, I mean, the first one that I used was probably a $2,000 camera, and now you can get something of similar quality for hundreds. So
Yeah.
What do you think about this de-icing cable ice dam scenario, Jeff?
Yeah, I mean it's right up there with just leaving your window open all winter just to heat the outside so it doesn't.
Yeah. How much
That's
do
the
those
best
go
analogy
for?
ever.
What does a system like that cost anyway? Like what
Oh, it's cheap. The cable's like maybe $1 a foot or $2 a foot or whatever.
Which is why people do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, they're basically like extension cords that just happen to have enough resistance to radiate heat.
I'd love to know what 30 or 50 feet of that consumes in electricity running. I bet you could figure it out pretty readily by looking at one of the websites. Someone's going to write in with schooling me on this.
Well, I have to say, it's like you pointed out, Patrick, if you have a cathedral ceiling, which I do, what are the options, really? I mean, without rebuilding your roof, if you can get up into your attic and do some air sealing around, that's
Your
a whole
options
different...
are very limited.
They're very limited.
Well,
so.
One thing I've always come across, and when you're doing remodeling, is that people are often hesitant to make big holes in drywall, but sometimes that's really the easiest solution. If you can get to the top plate or the tops of your walls and do some better insulation and air sealing in there, it's annoying to have to do that, but because he was saying that he doesn't have an attic to crawl around and to easily get to those eaves, but
Yeah.
it's a lot cheaper in the long run than a lot of the other options.
You can imagine, though, a lot of clients are going to be like, no way, you're not cutting holes in my kitchen or, whatever it is, right?
Maybe
It's
they need to see their utility bills after 3 years of using the other system. Maybe that's the difference, right?
Oh, let him put the heating cable up there and then see what it costs?
Yeah.
I mean, those cables work, but again, they're a small investment, but a big draw on your money if you've got a lot of snow. I mean, I guess maybe if you don't get a lot of snow and you just need them once in a while and you flip them on, maybe it's not a big deal. It's certainly the easiest solution, but not the best one.
Another go-to technique for folks living in northern New England and the northern Great Plains is a roof rake. And every time it snows, you get out there and you pull the snow off of it, and boy, that's a fun pastime.
I like that idea.
Yeah.
That's what I would do.
There's some pretty groovy ones that aren't just rakes. They're actually these 2 bars with pieces of sheet metal or plastic that you throw up over and you pull it underneath, and the metal or the plastic is more slippery than the roof, so it actually causes the snow to slide off over the device rather than actually having to drag the snow down.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Kylie. Mm-hmm. One of my neighbors is getting a new septic system. I just saw infiltrator boxes being delivered by the septicologist.
Septicologist, I love it.
That's really what they call them in Connecticut. I'm not making this up. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. I'll have to drop that. Yeah, I'm still very impressed with the septic guy I worked with. He's coming back to try to locate my well. I'm
impressed with any septicologist, honestly.
Septicologist is my new
really
favorite
important
word.
job, right?
It is.
What were you saying, Rob?
Yeah, that was random.
That's all right.
Where did that come from?
Squirrel.
I really am perfect for this job, aren't I? Oh, John, in closing, if there's anything you can do to convince the people not to do this, do that. All right, just tell them it's a bad idea. They need, and you have to be the expert here. That's what Jake Bruton always says, and Steve Basic. You be the expert. Tell your client what they need to do. Help them solve their problem. This is not the way.
I think Rob's point about it, the amount of snow is really key, and we don't know where this person lives. That I can gather. Do you?
Right.
So that's a consideration.
It must know enough, though, that they get ice dams,
Yeah.
Right? Places that snow occasionally don't have that problem.
True. That's true.
This one comes from Brennan. Hey, FHB crew, I discovered your podcast about a year ago. Fortuitously, a few months before I bought an 1880s house that was added on to in 1920 and again in 2012. We live in Rochester, Minnesota. It's cold here. I have come to really enjoy the questions on the old houses because I feel like I can relate to each and every one. Our house was designed and built to look like a southern plantation by a well-known local architect to help a vascular surgeon from Kentucky feel more at home when he moved to Rochester, Minnesota to marry one of the Mayo brothers' daughters, who were the founders of the Mayo Clinic. When adding a few outlets, we discovered that several of our exterior walls have no insulation. Outside is steel siding, and it's unclear to me what's between the siding and the sheathing from an air moisture or moisture barrier standpoint. Based on what I can tell, the sheathing is shiplap 1x12 or so. It appears to be original to the 1920 remodel, but it's hard to know for sure. I don't believe there's any exterior insulation. Our exterior walls are 2x4 framed. Looking into the floor system, the rim joists, I think, are not insulated except for a few places where the first floor ceiling was replaced, so there is spray foam in those few areas. To cap things off, after we closed on the house, I discovered an attic we didn't know we had over our bedroom with a 10-foot tray ceiling. The rafters are 2x4 with loose 1x material over top and some form of membrane, then shingles. Previously, they had stapled poly to the rafters and filled with cellulose for insulation. However, it has now since all fallen down. We discovered minimal insulation over the tray ceiling over our bedroom, which is 2x6 covered in 1x lumber. Over the new bathroom remodel drywall ceiling, they have no insulation. I can also see daylight here where the roof meets the wall. I'm not sure if that should be sealed or not. I also found a chase for pipes and wires that runs from the attic to the basement. I can't imagine that's a good idea. We have radiators for heat and a secondary forced air system that supplements the radiant. We also have high-velocity air conditioning in the summer. We never actually felt like the house got comfortable with the AC running about 24/7 all summer, but it wasn't horrible. Our bill for electric was, though. Most of our time since we closed on the house have been spent in the new half of the house with radiant in-floor heat, so it was comfortable even in February. I'm not sure how comfortable the side of the house with insulation is, without insulation is in the winter. Now, after all that, here are my questions. I feel like air sealing is probably the top priority. I'm unsure what's my actual process for that. Do I just go around with some cans of spray foam and seal around any penetration starting in the attic? I have concerns, not sure if they're legitimate, that insulating the walls may reduce the drying potential of the cavities. There is no rot in them as far as I can see anywhere, so that there is either no water getting in or it's drying quickly. Is it risky to insulate without knowing how tight the outside of the house is? It's a 3-story with about a 14-inch overhang, and we do have gutters. All right, what's the best way to insulate the rim joists? While I have the subfloor off, it seems like a good opportunity to do this before we lay new hardwood. Do I buy one of those froth packs and get after it? Hire it out? Stuff Rockwool in there? Stuff it with one of the 10,000 walnuts that the squirrels have brought into our house over the last century?
I like it.
That might work.
Martin Holiday once asked in a Q&A post, does anyone know the R value of cashed lentils?
You should ask that.
What is the best way to insulate our tray ceiling? I was thinking about Rockwool and that it won't rot and it has low environmental impact. Do I need to put any form of air barrier over this? We have plaster ceilings and theoretically, and penetration should be sealed up before I put insulation down. Oh my goodness, okay. 5. Does the same insulation for number 4 apply over the drywall over the bathroom that has no insulation in the ceiling? Okay. We could keep going on here, but I think you guys get the idea. Have you looked at this house? We should try and explain this to our listeners who have not seen it.
Good luck
It's
with
amazing,
that.
right, Rob?
I didn't see any exterior shots. Is it beautiful? I wanted
It's
to see
absolutely
it.
gorgeous.
I wanted to see it.
Yeah, it's a very grand house with a deep front porch with big columns, and
It's a mansion, right? It's a beautiful
Plantation stuff,
mansion. Yeah.
it's got really nice separating lines between the first and second floors where they do the kickouts and the siding and deep overhangs. And the nice thing about it too is that the house, it doesn't have a whole lot of vegetation up around the foundation. It's on a sloping property, so that it doesn't look like there'd be any like moisture issues around the house. Like his concern about if he starts sealing things up, the drying potential, I don't see this house, especially since it's made out of 100-year-old solid wood, being a concern with air sealing detrimentally affecting the quality, the drying potential. But the main thing is there's so many questions there. This house is big and it's got so many parts they're concerned about. Really, I think the best thing is to probably start with an energy audit, which you didn't read. That was one of his last questions.
I know, because that would have spoiled the whole thing.
I actually.
But as far as do you want to start addressing some of the specific questions?
I want Kylie to weigh in here first if she doesn't mind.
I was just going to make a general recommendation because he's in Minnesota and so is Randy Williams, based in Minnesota. I looked it up. They're 4 hours apart. I don't know what Randy's radius is, but he would at the very least be able to recommend a weatherization contractor. And I agree, Rob, this house is complicated and there's so many different scenarios. But I think he's right. Air sealing is a great place to start. And if there's one thing I've learned about being on the podcast, it's that. So, that
podcasting is key?
No, that air sealing is key.
Air sealing is key. Oh,
yeah,
okay.
Exactly. So I don't know. Randy is an excellent resource. There's also this article might just be of use or at least of interest to Martin put together a piece, the 5 most important areas for air sealing. Actually, it's the title of the piece is Getting the Biggest Bang for Your Air Sealing Buck. And there's some really good information that I think would apply to this guy's situation, like how to prioritize where to get started. Yeah. I think that's really, I can list them or he can just read this article. So
we should not leave folks hanging. So the number one thing is you deal with bulk water, right? You have to deal with water that's coming in the house.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah. But it didn't, I guess I wasn't under the impression that water was a big issue for him.
No, nope. But the thing is, once you start doing the air sealing and all those other things, if you have a wet basement or if you have leaky foundation, you're going to exacerbate any problems that maybe weren't noticeable before. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I was talking about the drainage of the site first, because that's always the first thing, especially in an old house that potentially has an unwaterproofed basement. That's always the first thing you want to do. And I know I learned that the hard way because my basement has been super damp, in recent years because of all the other work I did too soon. Mm-hmm. But then so water, then the air sealing issues, and then you can move on to insulation. And with all those unfinished attics, doing the attic ceilings, doing the ceilings over the spaces below it's going to be a pretty easy insulation job after all those ceilings are air sealed, as he suggested.
What do you think, Jeff?
Yeah, the idea that he get an energy audit. That's going to tell you where to go.
Right.
Brennan, you get it. I'll read what Brennan said. He totally. He says, I'm worried about hiring an insulation contractor and having to spray foam everything without considering whether that's the correct thing to do. Right. Do I get a full energy audit first? Yes. And then tackle things of inline important? Yes. Is there even a point to a blower door test when I'm sure our house is leaky as a sieve? Well, that's maybe true. It might not be true. It may be true, but then you're going to know. And the blower door can also tell you where the biggest holes are to start plugging those first, right?
Yeah, like that chase that he recognized. That's a perfect opportunity.
That's going to be one of the places, I'm sure.
Yeah. And the good thing about Minnesota is that the state requires their utility companies, both the gas and electric companies, to set aside money for energy audits and rebates and that sort of thing. So
he's going to need it.
Reach out to your gas or utility company because honestly, a lot of that insulation work that you might get done, or even air sealing work you might get done, the air sealing might even be included in the energy audit sometimes. But also, any insulation work you do, you probably can get low interest loans that would make it so that the job ends up or rebates that makes it so the job costs less than you could afford to do it yourself.
That's awesome. I swear.
Brendan goes on to say, forgive me, I lost my place here. Brendan goes on to say, academically, it would be fun to see how much it could improve. How do I find a good energy audit company? So Randy Williams is the
Randy
answer
Williams
to that.
is the
Kylie.
contact. Yeah.
Yeah. He says, I have a million other questions, but I think these ones seem most pressing. While I've heard you guys talk about the importance of air sealing, I guess I'm not sure how to actually do it. Thanks for the entertainment and information. I hope you can help me get on the right path. So Randy Williams is going to help you get on the right path,
Yeah, he
Brendan.
will. Yeah, he will. He also has a couple of articles on GBA that he can, what's the reader's name? Or the listener's name?
Brennan.
He can take a look at. I'll put the links in the show notes. But Randy's article is titled Air Sealing Strategies, and Martin has another piece, Air Sealing an Attic. And those things, all of the information there is really applicable to his situation, of course. But what was my other thought? I had another thought.
You were going to ask Brendan for an invite when the next time we're in that
Oh,
area,
no,
because I want to see the house.
No, I know what it was. I get the best ideas for articles for GBA from being on the podcast. I have got Scott assigned on. I found all this research and shared with him to start an article on gray water systems, which is what we talked about last time. And
Cool.
This Brendan's question made me think, because all of this information is available on GBA, answers to these questions, but you have to kind of pick and look. And I think we should have one article that says, how to approach an old house, how to air seal an old house, where to start, like all the problem areas, products to use, best, tips for best methods, starting at the basement, working your way up to the top.
I could see that even being a series where you're sort of talking about the general topic and how you have to deal with moisture issues and that stuff first, and then you go on to how to identify the leaks, and then you move on to like attics and basements and
I
walls.
have an idea. We use Brennan's place as a case study, right? Gosh, every freaking thing is covered in that one project.
Well, it just seems like this type of information is often covered in the context of new construction, and it's harder to retrofit a house to be airtight.
Especially one that's been built, in 3 stages and has this complicated roof profile. It's a gorgeous home, though. I love it. Absolutely beautiful.
It really is. It's unique. It's like they said. It's based on a southern plantation, but it's definitely a one of a kind house.
It's beautiful.
One thing I just want to say before we move on, and it's sort of a theme that's come up a couple of times, both in people calling us out on our knowledge and just identifying problems with specific houses, is that really the best thing you can do is find out what local people have done before you, whether it be identifying a good energy auditor or a good contractor or even a neighbor, because there are vernacular details or construction methods in every part of the country, and you can't make generalizations about a lot of these things, or there might be common problems that just pop up in certain, even specific towns, because of the way builders built in that one location. So,
and if you go to the old timers, that's how you learn about those things. They know about neighborhoods that have peculiarities and in construction and problems that turn up at a certain point in their history. It's very valuable to have that history. This comes from Sam. He says, thanks in advance for any advice. I think that's being presumptuous, Sam. Hello, Fine Homebuilding Podcast. My wife and I recently bought our first house. I've been renovating it myself. While working on one room, I recently opened up a problem spot in a wall to see what was going on, and I need some advice. For context, I live in San Marcos, Texas, which is climate zone 2. There was a section of wall where the drywall appeared to have water damage at the bottom of the wall. This is on the exterior. Before purchasing, our home inspector thought it wasn't an active wet area and thought it was an area that had been previously water damaged from a clogged condensate line. This was because we could tell the AC used to sit in the attic above this area, but had since been moved to a closet nearby. I cut out the drywall around it, expecting to need to patch in some drywall. Instead, I found that the spot was still wet inside the wall, and then the problem was still active. In here is the refrigerant line for the air conditioning system where it enters and exits the house. I immediately noticed that this exterior penetration was not sealed well, and I could see daylight coming through. Look at the attached photos. My leading theory is that warm, moist exterior air is entering through this hole and condensing on the back of the cool drywall during the hot or warm weather, which is most of the year in Texas. If this is the case, then I should be able to fix the problem by sealing the penetration, replacing the insulation that I pulled out, and patching up the drywall. Does this make sense? And what would be the best way to seal the penetration? The exterior siding is brick veneer. My initial theory was maybe that the refrigerant line wasn't insulated well, and that was the cause of the condensation. But after inspecting the pipe insulation around the open part, it seemed to be well intact. Replacing this insulation would, of course, be much harder, as I'd probably need to open up more of the wall to access it. So I'm hoping this isn't the case. Thoughts here? Also probably relevant to mention that the framing around this area is definitely water stained, but it doesn't seem to be rotted. Thanks in advance for any advice. Sam. Okay, so who wants to start? I immediately get nervous about brick veneer in houses in hot places, right? Because it's a reservoir cladding. If you don't have a good water-resistant barrier on the outside and flashing details, you can have what is known as solar vapor drive. So when the brick gets hot, usually on the south and west sides of the house that get the hottest, it cooks the moisture that's in the masonry, in the stucco, and drives it towards the sheathing and ultimately toward the inside because it's air conditioned and that's the coldest thing. And and moisture want to move from more to less. So that's where it's going to go. I don't think that's the case in Sam's house. What do you guys think? It seems like it's just a leak around this refrigeration line, right?
It seems like he... Go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, it seems like he identified it. I mean, I don't have... doesn't... What he said makes a lot of sense, is what I'm trying to say.
I would feel pretty confident doing that fix. And you want to make sure that you want to seal it, not just at the brick cladding, but at where the sheathing penetration is. Because like you said, Patrick, if there is moisture back there from vapor drive, you don't want that moisture to be getting into your wall cavity where the condensate, assuming the condensate line is in the wall cavity and not behind the brick veneer. But because that's a pretty big hole. It was like he's got all the line sets and condensate line going through that brick for the AC
Yeah,
unit.
It looked like to me about 2 or 3 inches, right?
Yeah, so what do we know? It's like a 1-inch hole in a wall with vapor can carry like gallons. I think it's even tens of or even hundreds of gallons in certain situations, depending on the differential between the inside and the outside. And so if you've got a cold line set in there and you've got moisture going in from the damp outside, hot damp outside, you're going to get condensation on those pipes. So
is this one of those situations that would call for a wall sleeve? That's something that Randy has written about for clustered line
wall
sets.
sleeves are great, and we should try and explain what that is. So it's like a thimble for masonry connecting a fireplace, right?
Yeah, that's a good description. Yeah.
And it's got flanges on 2 sides and a telescopic middle that comes apart, and you drill a hole through the wall and you put this thing in, and what it does is allow you spray foam or put some pookie in there to seal around the pipes, right? Nobody does that. I don't know why.
Randy Williams does that. It's cheap, right?
It's just like, it might cost $3 more. Who the heck's going to do that? Randy and a few other conscientious folk, but...
Yeah. So obviously, it's kind of hard to tell if that's going to 100% solve the problem because you're going to close up that drywall and not see it. And Ben Bogey wrote that article earlier this year, why we need building sensors, and this is a prime example for a humidity sensor. Unfortunately, the average homeowner is not going to spend hundreds of dollars to put like a humidity sensor in that particular, just for this one little spot. But maybe, I don't know, I wish we looked into this ahead of time, but I'll bet you there's some kind of a humidity sensor that you could kind of stick through the wall or even have if you really wanted to leave an access port there for inspection, if it's in an inconspicuous place, if you want to check it again, months down the road after you've
what would an access port look like? Isn't that just another penetration?
Yeah, but we're talking about a penetration in the drywall from the inside. So if you seal up your sheathing and you seal up the brick cladding with some polyurethane caulk or whatever appropriate, waterproof sealant for the wall, theoretically, then you're preventing that humidity from getting in and condensing on those line sets. But you're not 100% sure that was the problem. So if you wanted to have
What's the biggest cork you can buy at the hardware store?
I mean, who knows? Maybe it could even be a removable piece of baseboard, that you put on with a couple of screws.
You know what that he needs is, those test plugs for testing waste lines, for plumbing
Screw-in
work.
PVC plug.
Yeah, it's a little plastic disc with a rubber section in the center, you tighten a wing nut and it expands and it seals up a vent stack or whatever, so you can pressure test the pipes. That's what he needs in his drywall.
Yeah, assuming that's not, because it looks like it's a visible corner when you first walk in the room, unless there's going to be like a vanity.
Imagine the conversations that would start. Then you would know who the people you want to hang out with are, right?
Yeah, I honestly, I've thought about, when I was worried about the covering up the limestone in parts of my basement wall and it rotting, I thought about putting in some plexiglass panels, maybe even some LED lighting in there, so I could just flip the light on and see what my foundation looks like.
Can also double as a club.
Oh man, why aren't access ports customary practice in residential construction? Why aren't there places where you can peek in the wall and see what's going on?
I'd like that in my house.
Yeah. Most building science nerds probably would.
I'm going to patent the Patrick plug, which is going to be the whole plugger for the access port.
You better be careful with your marketing.
Might attract the wrong audience or
crowd,
team.
Yeah. That was probably way inappropriate.
Probably. This comes from Jim Collins, our landscape architect friend in, was it Ottawa?
Yeah.
Jeff, yeah. I'm glad you do the show with me because you fill in a lot of gaps in my knowledge. Thank you. This comes from Popular Science, January 1963. It says, disposing of used engine oil can be a problem. Solution, dig a hole in the ground with a post hole digger and fill it with fine gravel. Then pour in the oil. It will be gone before your next oil change. Cover the spot with soil. It's not gone, people.
I think I told you guys this looks like something that the Farmer's Almanac would print.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, you like the little illustration they had,
yeah.
too?
That's what made me think of it. Yeah.
I've read that a quart of, or an oil change's worth of oil will contaminate 1 million gallons of groundwater. So don't do this. But it's just goes to show how attitudes have changed. Yeah. I remember a scene in Mad Men where the Draper family goes to picnic in this park, and they have paper plates and cups and all this stuff
and they
on
leave
this
it all.
blanket,
I remember that scene.
and they just shake it out. They shake
I
the
remember that
garbage on
scene
the
very
grass.
well. Yep, that's the way it used to be done, right? It's paper.
Oh man, you guys have anything to add before we part company? It's been a joy sharing this time with you. Oh, that might be an overstatement.
No, we got another project guide coming out soon. It's a kitchen design one. It'll be our first design guide, which is sort of like a new territory for us. We've got plenty of design content on the website, but as most people come to us for a how-to content, it's organized a little bit differently. But we've got lots of great feature
So what's the
articles.
project guide? I wasn't paying attention.
Kitchen design.
Okay. Well, that seems
In
useful.
fact, right now, we've got one of our Fine Woodworking's old editors, Asa Christiana, writing a whole series on kitchen countertop materials. So we'll have a whole buyer's
We need him
guide
for the magazine. What are you having doing web work? Come on.
Oh, it's going to go in the magazine,
man,
too.
get with it, Patrick. Digital first.
Web first.
Oh, there goes the backhoe from the septic system, Kylie.
Thanks for the update. I feel like my name is now synonymous with all things septic, and I don't like it.
I want to know who the neighbor is. I want to have a long conversation with them about that. So how did you notice there was a problem? Oh, yeah. I feel bad for anyone who has to do that. It's just tens of thousands of dollars to pour in the ground. You might as well just burn it. Take less time. All right, so Rob, Kylie, anything to add about GBA?
Not that I can think of right off the top of my head. No. Just chugging along, making new content.
Other than to remind people that, if you want professional advice, go to the Green Building Advisor Q&A
forum. Yeah, it's an excellent place to find
Better
free
advice than
expert
here.
advice. Yes.
And folks of you listening who haven't signed up for a web membership or an all access membership, please do that. You know, the podcast doesn't make any money at all. We do it because we love it. So if you want to keep the lights on in the shop, please help us out with a subscription. Well, unfortunately, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks to Jeff, Kylie, and Rob for joining me, and thanks to all of you for listening. Please remember to send us your comments, questions, and suggestions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com, and please like, comment, or review us however you're listening. It helps other folks find our podcast. Stay safe, everybody. Keep craft alive. Thanks very much for listening.